March 14, 2006, South Florida. The NFL offseason is in full swing, and the Dolphins under head coach Nick Saban are looking for an upgrade at quarterback. Miami sets their sights on two candidates, each coming off injuries. 27-year-old free agent Drew Brees and 29-year-old Vikings quarterback Dante Culpepper.
Dante back to pass. Caught! And it's a touchdown!
The Dolphins pass on Brees, citing medical concerns, and trades their second-round pick in the 2006 draft for Culpepper. Culpepper struggles with his health and accuracy in South Florida, and Saban leaves the Dolphins for Alabama. Drew Brees becomes a Super Bowl MVP and surefire Hall of Famer in New Orleans with the Saints. But what if?
Gentlemen, we are here for case 100-5, the case of Drew Brees. What happens if he does not land in New Orleans in 2006 and instead winds up in Miami?
Wow.
Ooh. What happens to Coach Nick Saban? Does he stay in Miami?
Sure.
Or does he leave for the University of Alabama? What happens to Sean Payton, the Saints coach? What happens to the city of New Orleans, which had just been devastated by Hurricane Katrina? What happens to the draft class of 2006 with Vince Young leading the quarterbacks? And finally, what happens to Drew Brees himself?
Great picture.
All right. Gentlemen?
Does he do any of that in Miami, DJ? That's the question.
Well, I think it's important to kind of think about where we are in time right now. When this all takes place, we're just coming off the Super Bowl where Dave's Pittsburgh Steelers have beat the Seattle Seahawks. And you've got the Patriots who are always lurking around during this time period.
Back to back. 3 out of 4.
I think about that division that's been run by Tom Brady and the quarterbacks he hasn't had to play in that division. And all of a sudden now you add Drew Brees into that division, it gets interesting.
Well, you know, the Dolphins were coming off a 9-7 season, right? So they're 9-7, and they're quarterback short. Now, at that time, Drew Brees is coming from the San Diego Chargers. He was there for 5 years.
Doesn't get much better than this, does it?
Brees is just absolutely cutting them a rating. Cutting them a rating. Surgery right now.
He went to the playoffs once. He did have a Pro Bowl to his name, but he wasn't quite yet Drew Brees at that point. And in week 17 of the 2005 season, he's playing the Denver Broncos and John Lynch levels him, and that shoulder, that labrum, the issue with it. And so then it becomes a question of, if he can pass this physical in Miami, they're ready to sign him. That was the issue. And we have seen Drew Brees and Sean Payton obviously have just flourish. Super Bowls and 5,000-yard seasons and winning divisions. But who's to say that couldn't happen in Miami with Nick Saban? And if it did happen at anywhere near the success that we've seen in New Orleans, maybe Nick Saban stays in Miami and he never goes to the University of Alabama.
Because it changed the complete landscape, not only of the NFL, but of college football as well.
Alabama wins! The Crimson Tide will not be denied. Nick Saban with his 6th national championship.
In a couple of minutes, we have just destroyed Pigskin's 2 chief dynasties. The Patriots at least go down a little bit. Drew Brees makes it so that Tom Brady and the Patriots aren't standardly kissed in to not only a division title, but also into one of those top 2 AFC seeds. So, of course, I think you can make a pretty compelling case that the Patriots would have 2/3 as many Lombardis as they have, half the number that they have currently. And like you say, DJ, they also, Bama, that dynasty just never happened. But in the meantime, without Drew Brees, the Saints desperate for a QB. You'll remember the trio of guys that were considered. Mario Williams still goes to the Houston Texans, but the Saints wouldn't have drafted Reggie Bush. They would have drafted the guy who just won a national championship. Vince Young would have been the quarterback down in New Orleans.
Would it have been Vince or Matt Leinart?
You think he would have gone?
Which one?
It could have been Matt Leinart. I will defer to Daniel Jeremiah, our draft guru. Would it have been VY or Matt Leinart?
Well, I think that's a fascinating, when you look at the Saints and what he's been able to do, a guy we talk about all the time, right? When he has an athletic quarterback, kind of sprinkle him in a little bit. We've seen what he's been able to do. So you get an athlete like that I don't know. Sean Payton might have been ahead of the curve at that point in time to see
Taysom Hill.
Vince
Taysom
Young.
Hill.
That's what I'm getting to. You've seen it with Taysom Hill. Now you could have seen it full time with Vince Young.
I agree. However, we talk about situations, and you can't just drop any quarterback into any system. And Tom Brady probably is not the GOAT if he doesn't land in New England with Bill Belichick and so on. Any number of examples. I don't think VY thrives. Let's say he doesn't. And now do some positive.
Well, say he doesn't go to Tennessee and he does go to New Orleans. That means that he would have Sean Payton as his head coach as opposed to this guy right here. No disrespect to Jeff Fisher, but Jeff Fisher's track record when it comes to cultivating quarterbacks.
Well, he was the Rookie of the Year.
Vince Young takes her to the house. An unbelievable ad-lib by the rookie quarterback, Vince Young.
Yeah, he was. But, I mean, in the long term, we saw what Jeff Fisher could or could not do with quarterbacks in that Rams system. If you think about it, Vince Young, if he had Sean Payton as opposed to Jeff Fisher.
No, I agree with that point, Cole. I agree that if you put any quarterback with Sean Payton, they're going to improve. He's going to play to their strengths, and he's going to play to what they do well. I mean, we see it right now. We saw it with Teddy Bridgewater. We've seen it with Taysom Hill. We've seen it with various guys.
Tennessee, though, probably winds up with Matt Leinart, and Reggie Bush floats out there.
Let's say Sean Payton, who we all will say is one of the best play callers there is.
Yeah.
But if it didn't work out with Vince Young or whoever else they ended up with, maybe it doesn't work out for him there in New Orleans. Maybe at some point in time he goes back here to the Dallas Cowboys, something that's been talked about for a long time. And that relationship that we've talked about with Sean Payton and Drew Brees, now that relationship is with Tony Romo.
So what happens to Romo?
Payton. Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what happens. The memory that a lot of people will talk about with Tony Romo and his legacy.
Seattle.
Ball that looked like this?
Exactly. That slick ball that Colt loves talking about here. That's what people think about a lot when they talk about Tony Romo.
Oh, it is fumbled by Romo, and then Romo's going to run to the end zone, and he's going to get tackled.
With Sean Payton, this is the image that people would be thinking about.
Yeah.
You know what? If you really accelerate,
they would have won big.
If you go down that path, if Sean Payton moves on quickly, you'll remember the Tony Romo Cowboys were 13-3, and Eli picks them off in the divisional round. You could make the case that Sean Payton instead wins that game. They're the ones who go to play Tom Brady and company undefeated. What the result of that game is, I'm not sure, but obviously it completely changes history. And one thing it definitely does is take away Eli's Hall of Fame candidacy. It would be nil at this point.
Let me ask you guys this, though. When we talk about Sean possibly going to Dallas or ending up in Dallas because of this, we know this about Dallas. If you win, you've got to share credit with the man at the top.
That's true.
Could Sean Payton and Jerry Jones coexist long term? I'm not saying short term. Obviously, you can do it short term. But man, those are two pretty powerful egos.
Mm-hmm.
Jerry
Johnson couldn't do it.
Jerry Jones hasn't been able to put a trophy in that case since
Jimmy left.
Well, yeah, you get one with Barry Switzer, but since that period of time, I think he would have been a little more willing to share the stage, knowing this guy can fill up that trophy case.
But I think the safer assumption is that the relationship with Payton and Romo would have been good. So I think that Romo has the same basic level of success as Brees.
If Drew is in Miami, does he have the same type of success?
No, but if you look at Drew Brees' championship year, okay, Greg Williams was the defense coordinator, and a big part of that success that year was all the guys in the back end taking the ball away and giving extra bats to Drew Brees. That's probably going to happen with Nick Saban in Miami.
They're going to play great defense.
They're going to play great defense. And so you're going to have a Drew Brees. Now, it might not be the same chemistry that he has right now with Sean Payton, but you're going to have a great defense. You're going to have great structure. You're going to have great discipline. All the things that Drew Brees thrives upon. When you got Nick Saban running the defense, he ran the defense for Bill Belichick in Cleveland. When he's running the defense, you're going to be a top-flight defense. And he's got the middle linebacker right there to run it. He's got Jason Taylor. He's got great players there in Miami.
And your pieces are Ronnie Brown in the backfield and
Chris Chambers at wide receiver.
Ted Ginn Jr. as a young borderline bust, but maybe Drew Brees turns that around earlier.
He looks like
as he did later in his career.
Right, exactly. It's not an abject bum
No,
roster.
but if there's stability in Miami, and you have Brees,
the key word.
If you have stability with Nick Saban, coming off a 9-7 season with Drew Brees, you're gonna have stability to keep building it. You're going to add the pieces. You know, it could be championship defense first, then give Drew Brees the help. But you're going to have stability to build. And Nick is going to be all over.
Okay,
but all over the personnel.
We all know Nick. How long does Nick stay in Miami? He was a restless soul before he went to Alabama.
If he believes he has the pieces in place to go up against Belichick, knowing their history
Yeah.
together.
Oh.
And he wants to challenge himself, knowing I've got a quarterback that I can go toe-to-toe with his quarterback, and now my defense against his defense. I think that competitive
That would've
gene
been
gets
fun.
turned up, and I think he
The
stays there for quite a while.
The AFC East becomes the most
Would've been
compelling division in all of football.
Since
Without
the
a doubt.
NFC East in the early
Yes.
late 80s, early 90s, it would have been the most compelling division because, like you say, Rex Ryan, that team
right.
was formidable. So
Sure.
yeah, it would have been a great division, top to bottom.
What does it do for the city of New Orleans?
68,000 fans, 68,000 emotions.
Well, I don't think there's any debate that the success that the Saints had, winning the division right away in 2006, the renovation of the Superdome, and with it, the rebuilding of New Orleans was tied to the success of the New Orleans Saints, tied to Drew Brees. Like everything they did, whether it was community outreach, whether it was the pride that, there you go.
You take a look at this and how the Superdome looked back then,
Yeah.
and you think what Drew Brees actually did for that city, being the ambassador to the
I was
city that he
I was in the
was.
Dome that night against Atlanta Falcons in 2006.
That's
in the
Steve
home
Gleason
opener.
when he blocked that?
Yeah, we've all been in places where the crowd just is just so overwhelming.
Just listen to this crowd. Oh my gosh, what a moment.
But just seeing how they rebuilt that stadium, the lighting, it went from this dark cellar to like almost this shining beacon.
I think as much as the Saints and Brees and company helped the city, I think you can make a case the city helped inspire Brees and the Saints.
No question.
I think that New Orleans was right on the cusp. If you'll recall, Tom Benson, there was a lot of talk about New Orleans' viability as a city, legitimately. Could it be populated going forward? I wonder if, in failure by the Saints, if they then pick up and move. Tom Benson was talking about San Antonio.
San Antonio.
And you may also know that around that time, I mentioned
And
the
he was
Houston
being
Texans.
courted heavily by San Antonio.
Right, and the Houston Texans had just taken over that town in the bid for the new franchise, the 32nd franchise. LA still without a team. I think, and I legitimately think this, that the New Orleans Saints become the Los Angeles Saints, an oxymoron in a city filled with teams with oxymoronic names like the Lakers in a town where there are no lakes and the LA Dodgers named after trolley Dodgers. The Saints would fit in beautifully in Los Angeles. I think we're watching in Los Angeles the Saints for the last 10 or 15 years.
Remember, it was Commissioner Tagliabue who stopped them from going to San Antonio. Benson was on his way out the
Because
door.
of territorial rights right there.
I think we can debate who the big winner is with Drew Brees signing in Miami. We can debate that, but I'll tell you, there is no question who the big loser is. That's the Alabama football program.
And the Patriots dynasty. This was we did a lot of meaningful work in this one. We took down the two biggest dynasties of the century.
So, if Drew Brees lands in Miami instead of New Orleans, the Saints draft Vince Young, who shows promise but fails to make a Super Bowl run, and ultimately marches out of New Orleans, with the Saints not far behind. Sean Payton catches on in Big D, where he helps take Tony Romo from exceptionally good to Hall of Fame great. And down in Miami, Drew Brees still reaches his Hall of Fame potential. And without their annual AFC East cakewalk, the Patriots see their dynasty knocked down a notch. Nick Saban never leaves the Dolphins for Alabama, and college football's greatest dynasty evaporates.